Crumbling vital public services, a cost of living crisis, a housing crisis. Across the West, much of the same problems are plaguing regular people. But don't worry, many of us have already got this all figured out. Like here in the UK, we have all of those issues, and then some. Are you ready to know what the cause is? Refugees. Yes, that's it. No, not those ones. There is a lot of talk about refugees and illegal immigration as of late. Let me just come out with it. The idea that stopping the boats or freezing non-essential immigration would even put a dent in fixing any of the country's problems, let alone solve all of them, is literally just So let's look at the reality. How many refugees are we actually talking about in the UK? Now, just to be clear, an asylum seeker is someone who is seeking refuge but has not been granted official refugee status to remain. Relative to its population, the UK ranks 17th in Europe for asylum applications per capita, hosting fewer refugees than the EU average. In 2023, there were around 67,000 asylum applications accepted, around 84,000 individuals. Keep in mind, one application can cover multiple people. Now, this number might sound high, but let's put it into perspective. Refugees and asylum seekers make up about 11% of all immigrants in the UK. That's not a majority, not even close. In fact, it's a fraction of the population. But let's break it down further. Who are these refugees? Where are they coming from? Government statistics often show that the largest groupings of asylum seekers to the UK were from Asia, and the biggest grouping from Afghanistan. Only this skews the picture slightly. Let's talk about the rhetoric around refugees. Anti-refugee sentiment is often couched in concerns about economic strain or cultural preservation, but it's clear that such arguments conveniently ignore facts when it suits a particular agenda. For example, there's little outcry about hosting Ukrainian refugees, even though their arrival in 2022 alone outpaced all refugees granted asylum from 2014 to 2021 combined. This flow was much larger in scale than any other single forced migration flow to the UK in recent history. Now, bear in mind, I am not by any means expressing opposition to the UK providing Ukrainians with a clear pathway to refuge and a safe life. I'm all for it. I'm just pointing out the flaws and fallacies in the narrative peddled by the right. Don't believe me? Listen to Nigel Farage.
It is clear the tide of human misery leaving Ukraine continues at the same pace. It does seem to date that Poland particularly has handled this incredibly well. We're not seeing vast refugee camps and all the problems associated with that. Yes, of course, community centres and sports halls are being used, but a very large number of Polish people have stepped up to the plate and said, right, we will take people in for a period of time. These genuinely are refugees, and if you believe some reports from the European Union, they say up to 5 million could flee Ukraine's borders if this war continues. Now, most of those, from what I can understand, most of those that are leaving want to go back as quickly as they can.
Have you ever heard Nigel express such heartfelt concern for the plight of refugees and those impacted by conflict, followed up by the sentiment that we aren't doing enough? I mean, I don't have to straight up tell you why this is, do I? Contrast that with this. As of recent data, the UK hosts approximately 231,000 refugees, not including over 213,000 Ukrainian refugees, and has around 127,000 pending asylum cases. Refugees make up about 0.69% of the UK's total population. Asylum seekers in the UK who are still in the application process account for just over 0.2% of the population. Figures such as Farage or Little Zionist smackhead Yaxley Lennon sensationalize the issue of immigration for, let's face it, brown and black people, particularly Muslims, using words such as invade to dehumanize those risking their lives on being provided refuge in order to build an enemy narrative because they're an easy target. It's way simpler to blame all your problems on poor people who have no influence whatsoever over your life and buy into the idea you are being replaced in some grand scheme. Buzz phrases such as stop the boats blow out of proportion completely the issue of asylum seekers, of which only 3.7% in the year ending June 2023 arrived by boat. And those trying to draw a distinction between those refugees taken in under specialised schemes and those entering the country one way or another should know that seeking asylum is actually a human right, something you would want access to should your own country become embroiled in war. Reforms claim that strict immigration limits are the only way to ease pressure on public services is not only misleading but absurd. Blaming less than 0.6% of the population for systemic issues ignores the true culprits. Decades of neoliberal policies, underfunding and privatization. Private companies in the form of housing trusts, associations and private landlords purchase houses and then rent them out as shared accommodation, yet still charge councils exorbitant fees in rent and maintenance of sometimes up to £1,000 per person. On top of this, housing trusts then charge tenants service charges, taking more from what minuscule income they receive from the universal credit. But this only happens once an asylum seeker is granted refugee status, at which point the new refugee is given around a week to find some kind of housing before they're kicked out of their temporary asylum seeker accommodation. If they're lucky, the council finds them something. If not, they're sleeping on the streets. This is the reality for tens of thousands of refugees. Councils and the government are aware of this exploitation but refuse to publicise the issue because it exposes the crookedness that lies in the heart of profiteering off some of the most vulnerable people in our society. But let's say you're a bigot and you couldn't give a about refugees. What if I told you that most of this applies to homeless people too? Yes, the white working class have much more in common with working class ethnic minorities and immigrant communities. If you're angry about wasted taxpayer money or crumbling services like the NHS, aim your frustration at the political establishment and its capitalist framework. Chronic underfunding, aging demographics, and poor workforce planning, not immigration, are the real reasons for public service strain. In fact, a report from the Commission on the Integration of Refugees found that the UK economy would actually receive net benefits of over £1.2 billion in 5 years if employment support and English language for refugees were quickly implemented. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Do you want to know the best way, the easiest way to stop refugees invading our shores? Stop invading theirs. Britain bears the brunt of responsibility for why most of these refugees and immigrants pick up their lives and move far away. Let's take Afghans, for example. Since 2021, when Western forces ended their occupation of Afghanistan 20 years after invading it, has resettled a mere 29,000 from a country we are directly responsible for destroying. Oh, the Taliban, you say? Well, who do you think created it? We did. In the 80s, with the help of our best friend, NATO also bombed Libya, which was a stable country that provided free electricity to all of its citizens, into a failed state with open-air slave markets. We also helped destroy Syria by creating and arming terrorist organizations which would go on to rampage and destroy Iraq, which is another country we invaded after having supported and armed its dictator, who in turn waged war on Iran, another country we have imposed brutal sanctions on and meddled with endlessly since the 19th century. You have no moral basis. If you want to stop refugees coming, then stop creating them. You want to stop small boats, protest your own government sending big boats with big guns to shoot poor people and steal their resources and a right to live a safe life. Stop invading, stop bombing, stop plundering, stop meddling. In the meantime, if you keep supporting imperialism and the lies of Labour, Tories, Reform, the Lib Dems or the Americans or the Israelis, then you can seriously and sincerely just shut the f*** up.